Hello everyone. Beginning today, we will spend some time studying together a high important Buddhist text, the Mulam Madhyamaka Kalika. Today is the first lecture on the Mulam Madhyamaka Kalika. Before formally beginning our explanation of the text, we must first address a fundamental question. Why should we study the Mula Madhyamaka Kalika? What place does it occupy within the overall system of Buddhist doctrine? In the course of teaching the Dharma, Vilamagi Griti, Harimitake has summarized several basic principles, which we currently call the 6 principles of Dharma teaching. One especially important principle is that our system of Dharma teaching must follow the Buddha's threefold doctrinal classification established in the Samthinirbhojana Sutta. According to this classification, the Buddha's teachings as a whole can be divided into the first period of teaching, the second period of teaching, and the third period of teaching. The first period of teaching primarily expounds such foundational doctrines as the 4 noble truths, the origination of the 12 links, and the 3 Dharma seals. Its most representative script pictures are the agamas. Agamas means what? We further divided the second period of teaching into 2 systems, the gradual teaching and the sudden teaching. The gradual teaching includes provisional Madhyamaka, centered on the fourfold 2 truths, and ultimate Madhyamaka, centered on eliminating the 2 extremes. Its representative scripture is the Diamond Sutra. The sudden teaching, by contrast, directly takes Parasagika Madhyamaka as its core. Its representative text is the Mudya Madhyamaka Kalika, which we are about to study. The core content of the third period of teaching can be summarized as the 5 Dharmas and the 3 natures, the 8 consciousness, and the 2 kinds of no-self. Its representative scripture is the Lanka Avatara Sutra, which we have just finished studying. Therefore, although this diagram of the doctrinal structure appears quite simple, it actually embodies Vimalagritti, Hermitage's overall understanding of the Buddha's entire doctrinal system. In other words, through the systematic study of 4 scriptures, the Agamas, the Diamond Sutra, and the Mula Madhyamaka Karika, and the Langa Avatara Sutra, we hope to present the overall structure of the Buddha's 3 periods of teaching in relatively complete way. We have now completed our study of the Langa Avatara Sutra and the Diamond Sutra. The 2 core scriptures that Vimalagritti Hermitage must next take up in depth are the Mula Madhyamaka Karika, which we begin studying today, and the Agamas, which we will continue to study after the Mula Madhyamaka Karika. Through these 4 scriptures, we hope to present the complete system of the Buddha's 3 periods of teaching. It should therefore be clear that the Madhyamaka Karika has a definite place within the Buddha's overall doctrinal system. It is an important scripture belonging to the 2nd period of teaching. This brings us to our second question. What requires particular attention when we start the Buddha's 2nd period of teaching? Put differently, what is the most fundamental distinction between the 2nd period of teaching and the 3rd period of teaching in Mahayana Buddhism? This has been an important subject of discussion in Buddhist circles for centuries. We have summarized our position in one key point: an extremely important difference between the 2nd period of teaching and the 3rd period of teaching lies in the standpoint from which the Buddha teaches. That is to say, in the 2nd period of teaching, the Buddha teaches originary beings from the standpoint of ordinary beings. In the 3rd period of teaching, the Buddha teaches the ordinary beings from the standpoint of noble ones. This formulation is extremely important and must be understood accurately. Since the Mula Madhyamaka Karika belongs to the Buddha's 2nd period of teaching, it necessarily possesses the fundamental characteristic of the period. It is a scripture taught to ordinary beings from the standpoint of ordinary beings. What, then, is the most prominent feature of the 2nd period of teaching which unfolds from the standpoint of ordinary beings? One of its most essential features is its emphasis on eliminating superimposition. Okay. As we have repeatedly emphasize the horizontal doctrinal system of the Buddha's teaching can be summarized in two major directions: eliminating superimposition and restoring definiteness. Whether in the first pillar of teaching, the second pillar of teaching, or the third pillar of teaching, and whether the Buddha teaches from the standpoint of ordinary beings or from that of noble ones. Those to whom we teach are always ordinary beings. This point must be made especially clear. Some people easily fall into the misunderstanding that in the third pillar of teaching, the Buddha teaches noble ones. This is not the case. The second pillar of teaching and the third pillar of teaching differ only in the standpoint from which the Buddha teaches. Those to whom he teaches are always ordinary beings. Therefore, every doctrinal system constructed through expressions and concepts is, in essence, an expedient means established for ordinary beings. If the Buddha were to teach bodhisattvas on the 10th stage directly, he naturally would not use this kind of expression. For precisely this reason, eliminating superimportance always occupies a central place which the entire horizontal doctrinal system. We have repeatedly emphasized this point in previous course because this most fundamental problem of ordinary beings is precisely that they continually impose superimpositions upon what they experience and become attached to them. Compared with the third pillar of teaching, however, the emphasis on eliminating superimposition is even more pronounced in the second pillar of teaching, because the second pillar of teaching unfolds from the standpoint of ordinary beings. It can express the state of realization of the noble ones only by way of negative implication, rather than state it directly in affirmative terms. Therefore, in the second pillar of teaching, the state of realization of noble ones is often expressed implicitly, indistinctly, and through the negation. In other words, on the second pillar of teaching, that the Buddha often gives only brief indications of the state of realization of noble ones, while consistently placing the emphasis on eliminating the anomalous superimpositions of ordinary beings. Before we formally begin studying the Mula Madhyamaka Karika, I therefore particularly hope that everyone will establish one important understanding. As a representative text of the Buddha's second pillar of teaching, the central emphasis of the Mula Madhyamaka Karika is eliminating superimposition. Moreover, both the extent and the force with which the text eliminates superimposition far exceed those of the Langa Avatara Sutta, which we have just studied. Put differently, the essential emphasis of the second pillar of teaching is the eliminating superimposition, while the state of realization of noble ones is generally mentioned only in passing. Therefore, when studying the second pillar of teaching, we must not read more into it than is there. For example, when the Buddha says neither arising nor ceasing, we should not immediately think, this means that substance neither arises nor ceases. In many cases, such an interpretation is precisely an additional superimposition. This is because in the second pillar of teaching, the Buddha's central purpose is to eliminate the attachment of ordinary beings to be substantial existences of arising and ceasing. Thus, when the Buddha teaches neither arising nor ceasing, our first question should be, what attachment is the Buddha seeking to eliminate? We should not rush to possess yet another truly unceasing entity behind the teaching. This point requires a particular emphasis because throughout history, many people in both Chinese Buddhism and Tibetan Buddhism have tended to read too much into this issue. Many later interpretations may not, in fact, reflect the Buddha's original intent, but it instead constitute further conceptual superimpositions added by later generations. The above constitutes the 2 points of preparation I wish to provide today before we formally begin our study of the Mula Madhyamaka Karika. The place of Mula Madhyamaka Karika within the Buddha's overall doctrinal system. Since the Madhyamaka Karika belongs to the Buddha's second pillar of teaching, it necessarily bears the distinctive characteristic of the period it teaches ordinary ordinary beings from the standpoint of ordinary beings and places its central emphasis on eliminating superimposition. Therefore, when studying the Mula Madhyamaka Karika, we must avoid overinterpretation and additional superimposition. These are the two fundamental points to be made before we formally begin our explanation of the Madhyamaka Karika. Okay, that's all today.